Hey everybody. So I wanted to talk to you in this video about Act 1, Scene 2 of Hamlet. And so this scene is not really full of any sort of action or tone or anything like that. This is really more exposition dump than anything else. But it's still very important to understand what the heck is going on, both politically and culturally in the kingdom and abroad, but also with the characters themselves. And so there's a lot of exposition, a lot of meetings and things that happen, and I'm just going to try to go through this kind of quickly. Um, and so, just to kind of give you the gist of the different meetings. So, the first thing we see in scene 2 is Claudius is with his new bride, uh, Queen Gertrude, his sister in law, now his bride, gross, right? Um, and he's giving his inauguration speech. He is now the king, and this is basically his inauguration. And so he's addressing all of the lords and ladies and courtiers and things like that. And he gives them information. He talks to them about how great his brother was, but then he very quickly jumps into, but it's time to move on, and he ain't getting any better. So it's kind of shocking for everyone. Number one, that he's married his sister in law, but also number two, that he's just like, okay, let's move on. But he's doing this because he wants to avoid uneasy questions. He wants to avoid suspicion. So he's trying to get everybody to just accept that he's in charge and to just get over it and move on. So, anyway, so that's what he's trying to do. And he talks about the marriage to his wife, and this is interesting. He then talks about what's happening with their neighbors in Norway. And this echoes what we learned in scene 1 about Horatio. Remember, I said that Horatio is used by Shakespeare as exposition and foreshadowing, but also Horatio, when he talks, you listen because what he says is true. And as it turns out, the information he gave the guards was absolutely true. Norway is gearing up for another fight. And Claudius tells this to his lords and ladies, but he tells them not to worry, he's already got a plan. See, Claudius is on friendly terms with the king of Norway, who is the uncle to young Fortinbras. So, just like in Denmark, there's a lot of parallels here. Both uncles have the throne, both fathers are dead, both sons, who are named after their fathers, are in grief over the loss of their fathers. The main difference is that Hamlet's dragging his feet about his grief, and Fortinbras wants action. He wants blood, he wants revenge. So, that's some parallels there. Anyway, so Claudius tells the courtiers that he's sending a couple of messengers, Cornelius and Voltimand, to go to Norway and tell the uncle, the king, that young Fortinbras is trying to raise up another army to attack, and to tell him to knock it off. Claudius is very confident that this will work because he's on good terms with the king of Norway. So he dismisses the guards and dismisses the courtiers. So then he turns his attention to Laertes. Now, Laertes is the son to the king's advisor. The king's advisor is named Polonius, and Laertes is Polonius' son. So Claudius comes up to Laertes and he's like, hey, I heard you have a request for me. What is it? And Laertes says, Your Honor, Your Highness, as much as I'm enjoying all the partying and the festivities and whatnot, I want to get back to school. I miss college and I want to get back to France and go back to school. And now Claudius is the king. Claudius does have the authority to say yes or no. I mean, it's his kingdom. Everyone in that kingdom answers to him. So he could right then and there say, no way, Jose, or sure, why not? But instead, look at what he does. He shows diplomacy and political awareness by asking his advisor what his advisor thinks. This does several things. First of all, it's Polonius' son, so it demonstrates that Claudius recognizes the father authority that Polonius has in the matter, but it also shows that he recognizes the advice that Polonius gives. Now, in your notes, you've learned already that the advice that Polonius gives is usually terrible, but Claudius is demonstrating kindness and respect for Polonius's position. And so it's a bit of diplomacy there. Now look at what Polonius does back. Instead of saying yes or no, Polonius then says, well, what do you think, my lord? Which again is kind of him tipping the hat back to the king and saying, I respect you. And so the two of them are just basically demonstrating that they respect each other and doing it in a very formal way. And eventually the end result is Laertes is given permission to go back to France. So then, and this is kind of the meat of this whole thing, Claudius turns to his nephew, now his son, and look at how he addresses him. The first words out of his mouth are basically, Hamlet, my son. Look at how quickly he's trying to replace Hamlet's father in Hamlet's eyes. This is gross, this is inappropriate, but he's trying to get Hamlet to move on quickly, just like he's trying to get the whole kingdom to move on quickly and respect his authority. Hamlet is like, what do you want? And Claudius is like, you need to stop moping around. It's been a couple of months since your father died, and you need to get over it already. And Hamlet's like, wow, thanks. That's very kind. And the queen, look at what the queen does. Hamlet's mother, the widow to Hamlet's father, says, yeah, Hamlet, get over it. Everybody dies. I mean, can you imagine? 2 months later, she's married a new man and has said, get over it. And Hamlet's like, wow, thanks, Mom. And then she says something that kind of pisses Hamlet off. She says, why do you seem so upset? And it's this word seem that really upsets Hamlet. He's like, I don't seem upset, Mother. I am upset. My father died 2 months ago. Your husband died 2 months ago. And you want me to move on and not be upset? Are you kidding me? And so Claudius and Gertrude they just chide him and make fun of him for this for a little bit. And then Claudius is like, look, I understand you want to go back to college too. And I got to let you know, I'm not cool with that. I want you to stay. So why do you think Claudius wants Hamlet to stay and not go back to school, but he's letting Laertes go back? I think the reason for this is he wants to keep an eye on Hamlet. This is the son of the man that Claudius murdered, and he knows that Hamlet has the political clout to ruin Claudius's life and to ruin his authority and claim to the throne. So he wants to keep his enemies close. You know, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. So he tells Hamlet to stay put. And his mom, once again, she's so in lust. I didn't say love. She's in lust with Claudius that she says, you know, Hamlet, I agree with Claudius. You should stay here and be with us. Now, Hamlet doesn't want to stay, but he also wants to be a good, obedient son to his mother and his dead father. So, begrudgingly, he agrees. He accepts, and he says, I'll stay. And then they leave. After they leave, we're introduced to Hamlet's first soliloquy. We talked in our notes that a soliloquy is basically like internal dialogue. Okay, it is a character's way of professing their inner thoughts to the audience without any other character knowing what they're saying. And so he goes into his first internal dialogue, and he just goes off. I mean, the first thing he says is he wishes he could commit suicide. But then he says he can't because it's a sin. Oh, that heaven hadn't fixed his gaze against self-slaughter, right? And so basically he's saying, I want to kill myself. I'm so in grief over my father's death, but I can't because that would be a sin and I don't want to go to hell. So he kind of laments, like, I wish I could die, but I can't, so I'm just kind of stuck here. And then he starts talking about his mother. And man, he is pissed. Now, he has no idea that Claudius killed his father. So he's just kind of whatever about Claudius. But man, is he mad at his mom. He's mad because in 2 months' time, she seemingly has forgotten all about the man she professed to love and has married somebody else. And this does not sit well with Hamlet. He is furious, and he says, "Frailty, thy name is woman." Now, he's not just making remarks at her, calling her frail, although he is. He's kind of turning that gaze that he has, that anger that he has, at all women, saying that all women are equally as frail and as weak as his mother is right here. Now, it's not fair, of course, but, he is a product of his time, and I'm not excusing it, but that's how he feels. And so he's very much in grief, and he's turning his attention, his anger, towards his mother. Okay, so then, the very end of this scene, Horatio appears with the guards, and they tell Hamlet about the ghost, and Hamlet is super excited. This is probably the first good news he's heard all day. And he's like, "I want to go immediately, tonight, to see this ghost." Hamlet's like, "I will make it talk to me. If it's my dad, it's going to talk to me." And so that ends scene 2. Looking at your questions, we talked about the news and Cornelius and Voltimand. The clothing, you can read up on that. We talked about that. Hamlet is basically in full-on emo mode. So yeah, basically, there you go.